We're going to start this morning with reading, so I want you to get yourselves ready for learning. Get your book boxes, get your thoughtful logs, anything you need to annotate, and push your chairs in and come down to the floor so we can start with a mini lesson. We're going to go back and look at our reading and our thoughtful logs, and we're going to talk about character traits. And I want you to find in your thoughtful log where you've noted something about character traits, and I want you to read and reflect. Take a moment to read and reflect what you know about character traits that we've already talked about. And share with me. Do you have an aha? Do you have a, oh, I remember this, or wait, I'm confused about this? Let's start by sharing our questions and our ahas. So look at it for a second. Adam?
Well, when I was reading back to when we had to do traits from George Washington's socks, I had a bunch from he was humble because he saved Katie without bragging about it.
Okay, so you remember looking back at that fiction piece and finding out what kind of traits he had. Did anyone else have an aha from there?
I remember when we read Snowflake Bentley,
yeah.
We had to find his character traits out of what we read.
Okay, so you remember that activity. Is anyone still confused about character traits? What's your question?
I'm confused on the character traits because I really don't understand how to find those.
Okay, well, that's what we're going to practice today. You gave me the perfect question. We're going to practice how to find character traits more today because practice makes perfect. So the more we practice, the better we get at it, okay? So I thought, well, we've read George Washington's socks, right? And we annotated fiction. And we're going to look at another fiction text, but there's another kind of text that we can use to help us figure out character traits. And it's not fiction. What do you think it is? Think about all of the schema you have from reading. Think about all the schema of all the activities we've done. What else do you think we can use? Katie?
You could use nonfiction because nonfiction often has real people, so it would probably help you more.
Okay. Who can elaborate on what she started to say? Nonfiction has real people, but it has more than that. Who can elaborate on that for me? Can you elaborate?
Facts about it.
Perfect. It has facts. How do we know a fact from an opinion? Really quick, how do we review a difference between a fact and an opinion? Sydney?
Well, a fact, everybody knows it, but an opinion, people can think differently.
Correct. Okay, that's a short way of thinking about it. An opinion is something you think. You can't necessarily prove. So we're going to look at different kinds of text. I'm going to show you some primary source documents. What are primary source documents? Back there for me.
They're actually from the real thing.
So are they from the real thing, or are they the real thing, or are they copy? Elaborate more. You're on the right track.
I think they are the real thing.
Yeah, usually they are the real thing. What are some examples of primary sources?
Some primary sources might be if you go back and you look at some, like maybe a newspaper back then.
Okay, so from that time period, an actual newspaper. Anything else?
A picture.
What kind of picture?
Like a picture of someone like standing there or in war or...
What do we call that? When we're looking at a picture of somebody or an event, it could be what could it be called?
A secondary source?
Well, no, it's a primary source because it's the actual thing from there, right? If somebody painted it then. If we took a picture out of our camera of it, it wouldn't become primary source anymore because it's not the actual thing, although it still is primary source because you're looking at the actual thing. But what do we call a painting of a person? What do we call a painting of a person?
A lithograph?
No. Think about it.
A portrait?
A portrait. We're going to look at a portrait. So we're going to study George Washington. We've been doing the American Revolution, and we started our lesson by looking at George Washington and who he was with fiction. We read the book George Washington's Socks, and we looked at the fiction text. And today I'm going to show you another fiction text, but now we're going to look at some nonfiction and primary sources, and we're going to wrap up. And your big question, are you ready? You can note this down if you need to. Your essential question for today is to decide Was George Washington a worthy leader, or was he not a worthy leader? Okay, and you have a paper in there already glued that has that question on there. Your summative is on there. Was he a worthy leader, or was he not? Do we all have to agree?
No.
We do not all have to agree. Do you have to back up what you feel with evidence?
Yes.
Yes. How do you back it up with evidence? What are some ways that you can back up with evidence?
You could use some of those things and say what and prove it. Like you could show where you saw it, or you could tell where you saw what you're saying. Like if I said the sky is blue, I would have to show you the sky.
Okay, so you have to prove it. You have to use something to show. So I want to read to you. We started a book, George Washington, our founding father. Does it look like fiction or nonfiction?
Realistic fiction.
Oh, Adam says realistic fiction.
I say historical fiction.
And Katie says historical fiction. So as I finish the last few pages, I want you to decide. You've got to pick a side. Is it historical? Is it realistic? Which one does it belong to more? Okay? Can you wait? Can you hold your question till I'm done? We left off, and there's a picture in the book. Do you think this is very accurate? Or is it hard for us to know? It's hard for us to know. We're going to have more knowledge to figure it out. So, at age 27, I married Martha, a widow and mother of 2 children, Patsy and Jackie. I had no children of my own. My principles were clear. The lesson plan was straightforward. The rules of civility had been a part of me since I copied them when I was 15. They sustained me through the birth of our nation. There's some tough vocabulary here. There's some tough vocabulary. In your thoughtful logs where it says powerful words and phrases, if you notice any powerful words or phrases the author used in his craft, write them down. What makes a word powerful? What makes a word powerful? It stands out, makes you feel something. Okay? My principles were clear. That stands out to me. That tells me that he knew what he wanted. When Virginia and the other colonies began the great debate for independence, I was there. I wore my uniform to the sessions of Congress. I was unanimously selected as commander-in-chief of our armies. I devoted myself solely to American Union and patriotism. Why do you think we colored our portrait of George Washington red or blue in your thoughtful logs? When you look at your thoughtful logs, you had to choose red or blue. Why did we color it red or blue?
Maybe because there's a good side and a bad side. Maybe if you didn't think he was a good leader, then you would color it red. If you did think it was a good leader, then you would color it blue.
That's very interesting, Evan, because that's not what I was thinking at all, and I like that perspective. I like his perspective. He used his schema and came up with a different perspective. What do you think was my teacher mind perspective when I decided to have you color it red and blue? Sydney?
Because those are the colors of America, and he was our,
So I was thinking more symbolism. I was trying to use a symbol to give you that, okay? Hold your questions. Let me finish. I remembered the advice of my youth. I kept my promise. I was the first soldier commissioned by my country. I remained in the army and did not return home until each battle was won. Darkness and defeat, success and uncertainty, but never despair. The virtue of my men and the nobility of our cause would ultimately bring our reward. God was an active agent in all that we were attempting. Our prayers were answered. This wonderful revolution was won, and those who would treat us as slaves were forced from our shores. But the end was just the beginning. The new nation was weak. We had national character to establish. The country needed to defend liberty and provide for representative government. The preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the republic model of government were staked on this experiment. A constitutional convention was called. I was unanimously chosen as president. We began our task. What was their task? That was a hard piece of text to understand. What was their task? What was their task?
Their task was to create a new nation, and so that it could be, instead of just nothing, but maybe make it stronger.
Make it stronger, right? They wanted to make a nation that was stronger. Did George Washington have visions, you think? Yes. Do you think he had dreams about it? Yes. Well, I want you to look. We're going to look at how we annotate text, and then I'm going to send you off to be a historian. Okay? I want you to be a historian. So close your eyes and put yourselves in the mindset. You are no longer fourth grade students. You are now historians, which means you have to talk like a historian. You have to act like a historian. You have to role play being a historian. Okay? And just turn yourselves to look at the active board. And let's look at this piece of text. And would you like to drive our technology for us today? Sure. Okay. So grab the pen and grab everything else you need. We've read George Washington's Socks while we're waiting for Anna to let the technology come up. She's going to get to annotate on the desktop. What does annotate mean? What does annotate mean? Scoot around. What does annotate mean?
To note something down.
To note something down. To show what's in your mind. Okay? Because can I dig through your brains?
No.
Not physically. That'd be kind of gross. But can I dig through your brains, through your thoughtful logs if you annotate?
Yes.
Right. So it's your job to prove to me that you understand what I'm asking you to do. Okay? So click on Annotate over Desktop on the left side. I want you to read this text. Okay? I'm just up here on the side. I want you to read this text as I read it. And then I want to pick one. We're not going to do the whole thing, but I want to set an example of one thing we can annotate to show what kind of character do we think George Washington had. Does character mean emotion? What do you think? Yes. It could? Does character mean emotion?
Well, a character trait is like how you are, and it's how you act, and it can sometimes be an emotion.
It can. Are they linked? Yes. So are emotion words good clue words? Yes. So let's look up here and see if we can infer a character trait. Okay, we do not know it. We have to infer it. What do we use to infer?
Our background knowledge.
Our background knowledge. We have to use our schema, and we have to use the words together, okay? Do you want to read it to yourself, or do you want me to read it out loud?
Out loud.
Okay. Matt was so overcome with relief that he was unable to talk, even though he had wanted to call to Katie and let her know that he was there. As he stood staring from the old rowboat, Matt couldn't take his eyes off the man who had rescued her. He was a tall, imposing figure in a blue and buff uniform. Matt had the strange feeling that he knew that man, for his figure was unmistakable, with his white hair rolled on the sides, tied in the back with a ribbon. His face was strong and proud. It was the face of a leader, the face of a determined man. His eyes stared straight into Matt's, as if one commander had recognized another. It took all of Matt's courage to speak. "My sister, is she all right? The child's alive. No harm will come to her." Who are you?" Matt stammered. "General George Washington, leader of the Continental troops," came the firm reply. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Matt mumbled. The general was not smiling, however, as the wind lashed the freezing rain and snow all about them. Who can share an annotation that Anna should make? Let's have Anna drive, and who can share? I want you to talk to Anna and tell her, and you have to show her evidence. So use meaningful conversation. Look on the board and use meaningful conversation about something that you think.
Where it says, General George Washington, leader of the Continental troops, came the firm reply. Where it says,
Explain your thinking.
well, when it says firm reply, it makes it look like General George Washington is not somebody who's like silly and nice. It's like he's somebody who's serious and needs to do business.
Okay, so go ahead and annotate that for us. Have you ever had an experience that tells you why something is firm? Has anyone ever been firm with you?
Yes.
When has someone been firm with you?
When I don't clean my room, they get really angry and they speak.
Who does that?
My mom and dad.
Okay, is that a file folder in your brain?
Yes.
Do you all have a file folder of someone being firm at home? Yeah. So you can relate to this, right? So you're going to work in groups, and you're going to look at various pieces of text and primary source. And your goal today, your objective, is to come up with 4 character traits for George Washington. And will you make a note why he said that? Right on the side, pick a color and write the note. Pick a different. Yep. You had 2 positive and 2 negative traits. Okay? You need to come up with 2 positive and 2 negative traits that you think George Washington had that would help decide whether he's a good leader or not a good leader. And that's what you're going to end up doing. Where do you think your resources are?
On Edmodo.
Okay, they're on Edmodo. Is there anywhere else you can go for resources outside what I give you?
The books up there?
Okay, you can use any of the historical fiction, realistic fiction text up there.
Maybe some of the primary sources that we have in our social studies books on the.
I wonder, yeah, that's a very good conclusion. I bet your social studies books has some primary sources that you can go and look. What would you use in your social studies book to find that primary source? Would you just start flipping through the pages?
No.
Would you just start flipping through the pages?
Well, first of all, you can go to like the table of contents.
You could go to the table of contents, and what's on the opposite end of the book that you could go to as well? The index. So you can go to the table of contents or the index, and you have to have some key words, right? Okay, I would like for you to work with your Scamper groups on this activity. Okay, so we're going to move around the room. You're going to settle into a position, and you're going to work with your Scamper groups. On the desktops, they're up. If you need, dictionary.com to look up a word. There's websites. Can you go to my website?
Yes.
Do you think I have links up there?
Yes.
Do you think that link can take you to another link? Yes. But it's really different to read a website, isn't it? So be very careful and mindful of what you're reading on the website and where you're clicking. Okay? So can I get you guys to move into your Scamper groups, take all the materials you need, and Scamper 4 character traits for me about George Washington. Lauren, your table can sit. 5, 4, 3.
Okay, so what are we like? Where do we put them?
Two positive and 2 negative on this picture of George Washington.
So, okay.
Lauren, look over there. She put selfish and loyal
And is it like asking
and
us?
then you like, so we could do, he was fearless. But we should, and then we could like put an example.
But we should put like words that we think he is like on another page, like this page, and then like see which we could make a list of them like we did on our Scamper, and then see which ones are the best.
I'm gonna click on social studies and see if there's anything about George Washington.
Can I get your attention for 1 second? Thank you, Anna, for looking. Nathan, can I get your attention for 1 second? On the active board, I've put a link to Think Like a Historian. Did you note some questions you have to ask yourself if you're thinking like a historian? Yes. What kind of questions do we need to ask ourselves? What frame of mind do we need to put ourselves in? Lauren, what was one of our questions?
How do we evaluate the evidence?
Right. And what does evaluate mean? We're doing what with it?
We're judging it.
Okay, we're judging the evidence. Is it good? Is it bad? Are you experts at it? No, you need life experience, but can you work on the road towards being an expert? Yeah. So we have to evaluate. Now, I've put the questions up there if you need it, but you have to think like a historian. So do I hear you saying, hey, dude, I think this? No. What do I hear you saying? What kind of conversation? A meaningful conversation. You're saying, well, here in this evidence it says, this word means, okay? You need to have meaningful conversation. That takes practice, okay? Go ahead.
I think there's a link to it. I don't know. Sharks Cove has it. I know.
But don't we want to get on Edmodo to where she put all the links?
You have to type in our previous minutes. Yeah, you have a lot of things.
You can read it and try to find things, and you can like circle things and calendar
I think it's in folders.
Yeah, and it's in social studies and science.
And all of these, I think what we should first look like is that biography she was talking about from the actual place or something. Let's look for that one.
Right, this is the White House.
We have to be careful. In the French and Indian War.
Well, we're not writing like sentences on here. We're writing words.
And so he was, but it's a fact. So he was a veteran because he fought 2 times. He like once in the French and Indian War, and then he didn't fight in the war anymore. And then after that came the revolution. And then he fought in that. I think a good thing we could do for him that I'm gonna put on my list is probably helpful, because he helped the whole army. Like, he kept helping in the army. And do people want to go in the army? No, but they have to protect their country.
I'm gonna search on dictionary.com another word for helpful, like maybe stronger, better word.
Yeah, let's go on thesaurus.
It's all the way up over here.
To defeat.
His statue is described as a great white ghost. Why?
Well, because it says that two trees are coal black, so there's like 2 trees, and then the statue's in the middle, and it's like really dark outside.
So you're inferring that the great white ghost must be the statue at dark time, at nighttime? Okay. And what is that going to tell you about his character trait?
That he's like brave.
What makes him brave just by being a white statue between 2?
Well, because if there's a statue of him, then he's like really.
So just the fact that he has a statue?
And like, because he's a leader and he's brave and he's like leading his men to like
Okay.
war.
So he must have been a leader. He was important enough to have a statue. If you read on, will you be able to find more evidence? Keep reading. Let's keep reading. Keep looking.
I think he was independent because here it says the American people were strongly independent. They wanted to do things for themselves. So, and since George Washington was the leader, he must have been independent. He wanted to be independent from England.
Okay. So he wanted a more independent. You think he was independent, like he was driven to fight for that? Okay. Well, think about that. That's a lot of words. Independent, driven. You've got to pick and choose. Remember, you're a judge. You have to evaluate yourself and say, what is the proof? Where's the proof? Is the proof in the pudding? Where's the proof? Look for the proof, okay? And will it help if you collaborate and communicate with each other? Right? So you need to collaborate and communicate with each other and think critically. So I want you to communicate. You have to talk to each other and collaborate and share ideas. Okay, and I'm going to come back and check in just a minute. Okay? Okay.
Go ask her. Miss Conte.
Yes,
You know that the thing from George Washington socks you put on that Microsoft Word thing?
Yes.
Our group kind of wants to look at the thing.
You want to? You can go take over. It's right down there. It's a Word document. You have control of your learning, so just go click on it.
Well, we could put like
like what I was thinking about when she was reading it, when she was asking us the questions, the leader, he was saying General George Washington, leader of Continental troops. We could say
There is your list of character traits and feelings that you guys are looking to reference. There's a difference between character traits and feelings. You've got to evaluate the word you're looking at, okay?
I thought when he was kind of saying in this sentence, I thought he was kind of like, he was kind of being determined and kind of like standing up for himself, like trying to like sound proud and trying to sound like a really strong leader, because he was like general, he was saying general, and he was like saying his troops and stuff. So
I think in a way that could be arrogant because he's like thinking all about himself. He's like,
yeah, he's kind of
leader of the Continental troops.
yeah, he was kind of being like stating his whole thing, like his whole profile of him.
Yeah, and he was like standing up tall in front of everybody, and he was wearing fancy clothes.
Oh yeah, that's what they wore back then, fancy clothes.
He was wearing fancy clothes.
Yeah, because that's what they wore back then. But
None of his troops were wearing fancy clothes.
wearing rags. True, so he was kind of like not.
He was trying to stand out and be ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
I think we should put that here.
So do you agree with this statement? When you evaluate that on Wiki Answers, now Wiki Answers is digital knowledge, right? And we don't know who put it out there, so we have to evaluate the source.
So by checking another source,
How do we check other sources to cross-check? Because just because you look on the internet and find that source does not mean it's 100% true, right? So help critically, let's collaborate together.
I think it's bravery because he was so brave to keep on fighting and going out into the battle.
Okay, so you do think he was brave.
I remember seeing something in a book. He was brave because they called him, he didn't volunteer, they called him to be the commander of the Continental Army. Then after, he went home, just wanted a peaceful life, but they called him back to be president, and he
Okay.
took that up too.
But how do we evaluate this source and how good this source is? What can we do to evaluate, to judge whether or not this person who put on the internet that these are the traits of George Washington are good? Where else can we look to back it up?
Your website.
Okay, we can go to websites. Can we use our social studies textbook?
That's what I got.
Okay, so we need to find some other evidence to back it up before we just take their word, because what if it's just a really big fan of George Washington? What if he's just a really big fan and he decided to put all this good stuff out there, which sounds nice, but it may not be true? So I want you to go look at some other sources and see if you can find some other sources that say the same thing and judge whether it was worthy of using it. Okay? What are we doing over here? What kind of traits are you looking for?
we're looking for some bad traits because I've already found some good traits.
What are some positive traits that you have found?
I found that he was courageous.
And what evidence do you have to prove that he was courageous?
I wrote that he was courageous because when everyone was discouraged, he kept on fighting. And my research was, and it was the social studies, because I saw that when they first lost, they tried again, and then they won on Bunker Hill.
Okay, so you're saying he's courageous.
Perseverance.
Oh, he's debating with you. Is that courageous or perseverance? So we have two dilemmas here. One is we have to decide which character trait we actually want to define it as. And the other is, was this a good source? Did you evaluate that social studies book as a real source?
Yes.
How is it a worthy source?
Because it was made by a bunch of professors.
Okay, so we know that the people who wrote this text were real, they were educated, and they were historians and professors. So this is a good source. If we had looked it up on Wikipedia, would it have been a good source?
No.
We probably needed more.
Anybody
Could have been.
Anybody could just write anything.
Right, so we've got to cross-check. So you have a good source, but you guys have to debate. Is it courageous or perseverance? Which one is it? And you're going to have to collaborate and talk to each other. You've got to state your side. And you might come to a meeting of the minds and decide that it's kind of both, depending on the situation. Well, talk to your teammate, talk to him.
Courageous because sometimes since the British were really, really, really strong, you have to be courageous and fight them.
Yeah, but perseverance means he didn't give up. He kept trying to do it. So courageous just means you're brave enough to do what you have to do.
Okay. I think it's right and that it is that one's perseverance. So I think
You can write it. I'm not going to write it.
I think these both
We need to find negative traits.
Okay, I'm going to give you a 5 to 10 minute, we're going to take a pulse point. So start wrapping up just where you're kind of at, what you've got so far, okay? Scroll down. And Jamie's pulling up a portrait. That's a primary source. That's good. And it's kind of hard to look at when you're looking at the computer, and you might, if you're looking at a portrait as a primary source, there are no words on that portrait. What evidence can you get off of a portrait? Back there? Talk loudly for me. What evidence can you get, Bella, off a portrait?
From like how that person is looking.
How they're looking? Get more detailed. How they're looking. Henry, up here?
Like when he was back in time.
Okay, but more than just looking. What are we looking for specifically? How they are looking. We want something a little more.
You look at his face features if he looks serious or...
So something on his face could, I mean, if I look at you and I just go, how do I look?
Like, you really want to do that?
Yeah, you really want to do that, right? You have to look at your face features. And can you also look at your posture? Yeah. And your statue and how you are? How about how you're dressed? Yeah, can you infer how someone is by looking at all these tiny examples? So you never thought of a picture as a source for evidence. That's why there's some paintings that I pulled off the Library of Congress and put them there. So look at some of those paintings and see how they portrayed George Washington. Okay, 5 minutes, pulse point. You're not going to wrap up today, but get as far as you can. Yeah, you can go get it. You may look at the George book.
Here, I found a painting of him. Or whatever. Picture.
Did you ask your teammates?
Yeah.
Let's look at his expression to
Guide
see.
Lauren where she can go for negative traits. She
Let's
wants to
see
understand what it
his
means.
expression to see.
Dive into
Maybe
that.
it looks very serious.
Emma back there says she's
Well, we
going to
already
help
have
you. Go ask
her.
her and then come check in with me.
So I think that's okay. We already have firm.
Did you guys
He's
settle on the
very
word?
serious.
What word did you settle on?
He was really strict because I bet his some of his some of his soldiers were maybe a little like they probably got mad at him sometimes because they would never give him a break, and they probably wanted to do certain things, but he was really strict and stubborn, so he probably didn't get they probably didn't get
Okay, well, look at it and tell me.
get a lot of rest.
What do you think, Alberto? Okay, but let's look at this picture. What do you infer? What character traits can you infer from this picture by looking at how he's standing? Look at his posture. He's got one leg up and his arm is on his knee. What does that tell you with somebody standing like that? Versus standing with his hands in his pockets. He's determined, doesn't it? He's ready. So is that part of character traits? Okay, so could you make an annotation in your thoughtful log that in the picture crossing the Delaware, George Washington stands like he's determined and ready to fight? Go make that notation. Good job. What did you find? I think you can do better than that. More than forceful. I say elevate it higher. Let's go higher than forceful. Firm? Where's your group? So why firm? How do you know he looks like that? Tell me what the look means.
arrogant to say that that's it.
How do you look serious in the portrait? Explain. You guys use descriptive words. Tell me.
Wouldn't give up when he lost one.
His eyes were staring straight ahead. You're right. And his mouth. See, you can get down to details, like main idea and details. You can get down to the mouth and the eyes. So he does look firm. Like your mom when you're in trouble at home. Make sure you're annotating. I got a thinker here. It's the first one I've heard today so far. She said, she and Emma came up with, I think we should look at some of this from the British point of view and what they thought of George Washington. Ta-da! Did I say you had to only look at it from our side?
No.
No one put those parameters. So now you can go back and see, maybe let's look at some of the things the British thought. Maybe there's some primary sources out there, and they write about George Washington. Okay? Don't wait for me to give it to you. Go looking for it. Go hunt for it.
Those are opinions of George Washington. And the colonists might have had opinions too, so you might want to look at it from a neutral point of view because
Well, who would be neutral at that time?
some people were neutral. Some Quakers were not.
The what?
The Quakers, because then they don't really have a side, so they're going to say the real part, and so that if you're a patriot, you're going to look the British look so bad and make the Americans look so good, and if it's British, it's going to be the total opposite.
Okay.
But if you're neutral, it's going to be how it is.
Okay, so do you have to do only what I give you and what I say? No, go beyond that. Is that thinking like a historian?
Yes.
Do historians, Indiana Jones's father, when he was a professional and he was a historian, he was digging for history, what did he do? He kept digging, Okay, so you're going to keep digging.
That's why we got this book, because it's from a perspective of the British and the colonists.
That's right, we read that, George versus George, the king versus George, and it was from both perspectives when we read it. So we can use that. Don't get zoned in on just one perspective. You've got to look at, you're evaluating. When a judge decides something, they have to listen to everything. Okay, 2 minutes and we got to take a pulse point. So whatever thought is in your brain, I need you to wrap that one up and tie it up. Don't leave a loose end. And then you will get to continue this, but right now, just tie up that last loose end, annotate that last sentence, and when you're looking at it, this is the time that you need to glance back and edit your writing. You need to glance back and make sure you have the correct grammar and punctuation and you're using academic vocabulary, because we're going to look at that. 2 minutes.
Real is maybe because all the stuff we've learned about the Revolutionary War, if it sounds right anyway, and it's also and it works out like how we learned it, and maybe it might be right.
So you need to teach her how to evaluate. She wants to know how you can tell it's real or not real.
And you can you'll know if it's real or not real, because tell me if this is real or not. George III, the king, was happy when the Americans won the war. Is that true or not true? Not true. Good. So you can kind of look at what it's asking you, and if you think that it's like what I just said, and you think it's not true, then it probably isn't, because we know that they were on two different opposite sides. So you have to use kind of your background knowledge and what you have learned about George Washington and what we've been learning about with the Revolutionary War.
I think we should go.
Is that a strong sentence that she found evidence in the text? Yes, as discouraged as Washington was, he was not prepared to accept defeat, not yet. Does that prove he was a determined person? So did she think like a historian and find evidence to prove her character trait? She says she did, right? What's your other one?
And then I got caring because in the book, George Washington, our founding father, it says that he dropped out of school when he was 15 because he wanted to help his family. Because I think his father died, and then so he needed to help his.
Well, how does that make him caring?
He for his family. He had to go help on it. He had to go out of school to help his family.
And if he wasn't caring, what would he have done maybe?
he would have stayed in school and not helped his family.
And how do you know that somebody who does that is caring? What experiences do you have? Have you ever seen anyone be caring? And what do they do when they're caring? Do they give up something?
Yeah.
What is that called?
Something for us.
When you give something up,
Sacrifice.
you're sacrificing. Is that what he was ultimately doing? So you have evidence from the text to prove that he was caring. Good job. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to continue this at some point, but what I'd like, ladies and gentlemen, bring your thoughtful logs and a pencil only, and let's take a pulse point and wrap this up. Let's come over here, back on the floor. Okay, just leave it. Come down here, and let's take a pulse point of where we're at. Okay. First pulse point. Thumbs up, thumbs down. How are we feeling? Okay. Looking at our self-evaluation scale on the board. How many of you feel you've moved further to the right? How many of you feel you're stuck? Yay. No one's stuck? Okay. So you're trying to get to expert. So we have back here, Katie, Nate, Evan, and Kanan. You stuck your sticky notes up here and you're saying to me you're experts. Are you guys still feeling like you're experts? Yeah. You still feel like you're experts. You can defend things. You can prove it to me, and if I ask you anything, you'll be able to do this for me. Okay, good, confidence. So then I can start assessing you guys, right? Okay, raise your hand if you think I need to add my sticky note there, I'm ready to be assessed. Okay, raise your hand if you're like, maybe a little bit more practice. Okay, so we're going to have a few more days to do this, but you need to, what is your ultimate goal as a student?
To try and
Get that objective. You got to get, that is your way to tell me, Ms. Gate, I'm ready. You can test me. I'm ready to take this assessment. I know what I've got to do. Okay, so make sure you're getting up there. I walked around and took some notes. What do you see in this picture?
Pictures of the social studies book.
Okay, why did Ms. Gate evaluate why I think this is evidence to show me my students were determined to do my task? Prove, did I evaluate my evidence? Sorry, did I make it small? Yeah. Okay, here. Evaluate my evidence. Emma, what do you see?
Well, I see that they're looking things up about the war in the social studies book.
Okay. Does that mean that this is good evidence for a teacher to evaluate how their students are doing? Anna?
Well, we had technology and you put up all that, and maybe they said, let's go a little bit more back, and it was edited instead of like websites. There you go. And
Okay.
sure not.
Raise your hand if you were in the group that worked on this in the back table. Okay. What discussion did we have? I want you to share your discussion with the class about why you evaluated the social studies book was a good source. You two, talk to the class for me.
Well, it was edited by a lot of professors and stuff, and it wasn't just like written by any person who just wanted to type something.
Correct. And what character traits did we come up with today? Let's share one or two of our character traits. Let's get back to our character traits. Okay, who can tell me? And I want you to have meaningful conversation. So you need to explain it to me, having meaningful conversation, and think like a historian. So you need to sound like a historian.
Imposing, because based on what I read, he was
Start your whole sentence again. Pick a stem.
based on what I read, imposing would be a character trait.
Positive or negative?
Negative, because he was controlling over his troops, but if he wasn't controlling that, he wouldn't be caring about them.
Okay, so they kind of had to work together, they had to weave together. He had to be imposing, which was negative, but it can be used positively, because if he wasn't, he couldn't be caring. Who has one more that we can kind of, and tell me, use a stem, show me the evidence. It's like, show me the money, show me the evidence.
Well, according to a picture I looked at, it said that, well, it showed him like standing strong, like standing up tall and proud when all of the troops were kind of just like, they looked like they were they just like they kind of looked like they were gonna complain and
So
stuff.
what was the character trait you think that describes?
Well, like I couldn't really find something that
The
would-
exact word?
Yeah, so
Let's help her.
But he stands strong.
Who can help her? Looking at our list of character traits, she said he was standing strong. I'm thinking of a word. Can you tell? Positive. Like, it's just burning in my mind.
Maybe determined.
Or proud,
Yeah, bold.
right? Do you think one of those would fit? And did she have evidence?
Yes.
Yeah, a leader. Okay. One last one before we stop so that we can. Henry, what did you find? Show me the evidence. You've got to use a STEM.
Based on me and my group, Fred persevered. He was being persevered at Valley Forge.
He was persevering, so he had perseverance.
Everybody had rags on their
What's your evidence?
at Valley Forge one Christmas when everybody had rags on their feet and they were walking and there was blood on the ground and all that. He kept on going with them.
So at Valley Forge, when they had rags on their feet and they were bleeding on the ground and they just kept going, does that show perseverance? Let's evaluate that evidence. We know in a history book it said at Valley Forge they had blood on their feet, they wrapped it up, and they kept going. Is that good evidence? Anna says no. Anyone else disagree? A little? What do you think?
I disagree because
Why is that good evidence?
I disagree because I think we're talking about George Washington, not the troops. But maybe it could have been right because maybe George Washington ordered them to keep on going.
So he was setting an example. But is that a fact? Did that happen?
Yes.
Yes.
They don't have any evidence to prove
Yeah.
it. They just say, well, this is this.
I don't know. Do they have evidence to prove that the troops had to wear rags and keep going?
They could,
So that's going to be your next task. As we go forward, you've got to finish your 2 traits. And I want you to find one piece of evidence from history that you're not sure, but you think might be right. Okay? And you're going to look at it. And so what you're going to do is going forward, you're going to finish evaluating sources and inferring good traits and bad traits. And what is the final question you have to be able to answer and write a paragraph on for me? What is it you have to be able to tell me?
Was George Washington a good leader or not?
Yeah. Was he a good leader or was he not, and why? And you have to write. Okay? I want you to take one last glance at your writing and make sure that you have edited it and revised it. In your notes, make sure that you have used good vocabulary, good capitals and grammar. Everything you write should be written as well as possible.
what do you mean by writing? Like, I know we had to do the word. What do you mean by writing?
When you're going to write at the end, remember that sheet we stuck in our thoughtful logs? That's your summative, and you're going to write a paragraph telling me. You have to decide ultimately. Anyone here think he was not a good leader so far? Kind of?
Well, no, like, when Nathan said that, like, the troops that they were fighting and, it was them that the blood was on the ground and it wasn't really about George Washington. George Washington was still fighting too. Just because, like, he's not in the, like, just because he's the leader doesn't mean he doesn't fight.
Yeah, I think so. I'm inferring that Brandon's going to be on George Washington's side. Why am I inferring that Brandon's going to be on George Washington's side? What did he just do that I'm inferring? I'm using what I know as a teacher to say, oh, he's talking about what Nathan said, that it wasn't about George Washington. And what did he just say? It was. So can I infer that he's going to take his side? Is that a pretty good inference to make? Pretty good. Okay, take one last glance. Okay, hold your questions.
What Henry said.
What did Henry say?
Like when Henry said about what he was talking about, I think that's good evidence because, like, when you can use like your background knowledge because you knew that the colonists were kind of poor, and they had rags and stuff. So maybe George Washington told them to keep on going. So maybe like that, so they didn't
have to be poor anymore so they can get their money and freedom.
So you think knowing what the life of a colonist was helps us determine that that was good evidence? That's a good task. There, you could do that. Absolutely. Okay, last thing, Katie, because we've got to go.
I kind of have a helpful tip for the class.
Oh, she has a helpful tip. Look at her. Here we go. Great. I love that.
Okay, so you know how you were talking about getting the British viewpoints, the loyalists, too? Well, it would be interesting to also get the neutralists because their judgment isn't clouded by what other people tell them to believe.
Which is what
they
Anna
don't
was saying,
pick a
right?
side.
The Quakers, yeah. Okay, I'd like you to put your stuff in your book boxes and get yourselves wrapped up, okay?